My supervisor called me into her office on a Tuesday morning, and I remember thinking it was about the Henderson account. It wasn't. She closed the door, which she almost never did, and sat across from me with this look I couldn't quite read. Not angry, not warm either, somewhere in between, like she was choosing her words carefully. "I got a call this morning," she said, "from the benefits office about your FSA account." I stared at her. "My FSA? There were some unusual reimbursement claims filed last month under your employee ID." She slid a printed sheet across the desk. "Did you submit these?" I looked down at the list. Dental work, an eye exam, a specialist visit, all dated within the same 2-week window, all totaling just under $4,000. I had not submitted any of them. I had not seen a dentist in over a year. I need to back up, because none of this will make sense without context. My husband and I had been together for 6 years, married for 3. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party. He was funny, easy to talk to, the kind of person who remembered small details about everyone he met. He worked in insurance. Not glamorous, but stable. He was proud of that stability, and for a long time, so was I. When we got married, we combined finances the way most couples do. Joint checking, joint savings. He handled most of the bills because he said he was better at tracking them, and honestly, I didn't argue. I was finishing my master's degree and then starting a new job at a mid-sized consulting firm in Chicago. I had enough on my plate. The job turned out to be a good fit. I worked hard, stayed late when I needed to, built relationships with clients. 2 years in, they promoted me to senior associate. It came with a raise, a better title, and a more comprehensive benefits package, including a fully funded flexible spending account. My husband seemed genuinely happy for me. He took me out to dinner to celebrate. He toasted to my hard work. What I didn't know then was that he had already done his research on exactly what that FSA covered. I sat in my supervisor's office holding that sheet of paper, and my first instinct was to explain it away. Maybe there was a system error. Maybe someone had filed under the wrong ID by mistake. HR things got mixed up all the time, right? But my supervisor, I'll call her Claire, was already watching me with patient eyes. She had been in HR for 15 years. She had seen a lot. "I didn't submit these," I said. "That's what I was hoping you'd say," she replied. "Because if you had, we'd be having a very different conversation." She explained that the benefits office had flagged the claims because they'd come in through an online portal access that didn't match my usual login location or device. Someone had used my credentials. They'd been careful. Small enough amounts to avoid automatic audit triggers, spread out over 2 weeks, but the location data didn't lie. The access had come from our home IP address. I didn't say anything for a long moment. Claire let the silence sit. "I need to look into this," I finally said. She nodded. "I know. Take whatever time you need today. And I want you to know, this investigation is about the account, not about you. You're not in trouble here." I nodded back. I thanked her. I walked out of her office and straight to the bathroom and stood at the sink with the cold water running over my wrists for about 3 minutes before I could breathe normally again. My husband had access to my work login credentials because I had given them to him about 8 months earlier. And I want to be honest about why. Because it matters. I had been traveling for work, a 5-day client trip to Atlanta. Before I left, he mentioned that he was expecting an explanation of benefits document to come through my employer portal. Something related to my dental insurance that we'd been waiting on for a routine procedure he'd had earlier that year. He asked if he could log in and download it while I was gone, and I said yes without really thinking about it. I even wrote the password on a sticky note for him. I never changed the password when I got back. I know how that sounds. I know. But here's the thing about living with someone who has been slowly, methodically eroding your sense of what's normal. You stop noticing the line. He hadn't done anything dramatic. He hadn't yelled or threatened or done anything I could point to clearly and say that's wrong. He had done something much quieter. He had made me feel like a full partnership meant no boundaries, that keeping passwords private was a sign of distrust, that I was lucky he was so involved in our finances because most husbands weren't. By the time I was handing him sticky notes with my work credentials, I had been conditioned to think that was just what a close marriage looked like. I went home that evening and didn't say anything. I needed to think. I sat at the kitchen table while he cooked dinner. He liked to cook, always made a point of it, and I watched him move around the kitchen and tried to reconcile the man in front of me with what I now suspected. He asked about my day. I said it was fine. He talked about a deal at work that had fallen through. I nodded. After dinner, while he was watching TV, I went through our financial records on my laptop. I had always had access to the joint accounts, but I had stopped checking them closely because he handled everything. That night, I started looking. It took me about 40 minutes to find the first thing. There was a savings account I didn't recognize, small, just over $2,000, linked to his name and mine. I had never opened that account. I had never signed anything for it. It had been funded by small transfers from our joint checking over the past 14 months, $50 to $100 at a time. Nothing that would trigger an alert. Nothing that would look strange in isolation. I closed the laptop. I went to bed before he did and lay in the dark staring at the ceiling. I kept thinking about something he had said to me once, early in our marriage, when I mentioned that my coworker and her husband kept completely separate finances. He'd laughed and said, "What kind of partnership is that? If you don't trust someone with your money, you don't actually trust them." I had agreed with him at the time. The next day, I called my older sister. I'll call her Faye. Faye had never fully warmed to my husband. Not hostile, just quietly watchful in a way I had always attributed to the protective older sibling thing. I had dismissed it for years. That morning, sitting in my car in the parking garage before work, I told her everything. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "How long have you been making excuses for things that didn't add up?" I didn't answer. "That's what I thought," she said gently. "Okay, here's what we're going to do." Faye was practical in a crisis. She had a college friend who had gone through a contentious divorce and had given her the name of a good family attorney. She texted me the contact while we were still on the phone. I called the attorney's office that afternoon during my lunch break. Her name was Patricia. Wait, no, I cannot use that name. Her name was Diane. Diane had a calm, direct manner and 15 years of family law experience, and the first thing she told me was to stop moving money, stop making any joint financial decisions, and start documenting everything. Before you confront him, she said, you want a clear picture. You want to know what you're dealing with. I spent the next 2 weeks doing what Diane told me to do. I pulled credit reports. There were 2 credit cards in my name I had not opened. One with a balance of just over $6,000, one with $3,200. I went back through records and found that the FSA claims were not the first time my work credentials had been used. Someone had also accessed my employee portal to download my pay stubs 3 times over the past year. I thought about why someone would want my pay stubs, and then I understood. To open financial accounts, to verify income, to make it look like I was the one applying. The picture Diane had told me to build was becoming very clear. I also started noticing other things once my eyes were open. The way he would mention, casually, that he had handled a bill or taken care of something, without elaborating. The way he'd get slightly colder if I asked follow-up questions. The way he'd pivot to something I'd done wrong, forgetting to call his mother back, being distracted during dinner, spending too long at the office whenever I got too curious about finances. Gaslighting doesn't usually arrive loud. It arrives in small adjustments. A slight reframing here, a gentle redirection there, until you're not sure what you actually saw or felt, only what you've been told to think about it. I wish someone had explained that to me earlier. I spent a long time thinking I was just bad at paying attention. I confronted him on a Friday evening. I had prepared for this with Diane. I knew what I was going to say and, more importantly, what I was not going to say. I wasn't going to accuse. I was going to ask and then listen and then let him fill in the blanks himself. I made 2 cups of tea and sat across from him at the kitchen table and said, "I want to talk about the FSA claims." He frowned. "What FSA claims?" "The ones filed under my employee ID last month. $4,000 in healthcare reimbursements. For procedures I never had. He leaned back. His expression shifted, not to guilt, but to something practiced, concern. Wait, someone filed false claims under your account? Honey, that sounds like identity theft. We should call HR. The access came from our home network, I said. Silence. The benefits office flagged it, I continued. They traced the login to our IP address and to my credentials, which you've had since I gave them to you before Atlanta. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I can't believe you're insinuating this. I'm not insinuating, I'm asking. After everything I've done for this family, I manage every bill, every account. I keep our finances running while you're traveling and working late, and this is what I get. There it was. The pivot. But I had been prepared for the pivot. I also found the savings account, I said. The one in both our names that I never opened. And the 2 credit cards. And the pay stubs you pulled from my portal. His face went through something complicated then. The practiced concern flickered. Something harder showed underneath it for just a second before he got it back under control. I want to understand, he said carefully. Where this is coming from? Who have you been talking to? That doesn't matter. It does matter. It does matter if someone has been putting ideas in your head. No one put anything in my head, I said. I pulled my own credit report. I have the account statements. I have the login records from the benefits office. I kept my voice even. I'm not asking you to explain yourself to me anymore. I'm telling you that I know, and that I've already spoken with an attorney, and that I think we need to figure out what happens next. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he said, You've already talked to a lawyer? Yes. He pushed back from the table and walked to the kitchen and stood there with his back to me for a while. When he turned around, his voice was different. Quieter. I was going to pay it back, he said. I had not expected him to just admit it. I had prepared for denial. I had not prepared for that. Which part? I asked. He didn't answer that. What followed was not simple or clean, because nothing about ending a marriage ever is. He moved out within 2 weeks. He didn't fight it. I think he knew the paper trail was too clear. Diane had been right about that. By the time my attorney was involved in conversations, there wasn't much he could dispute. The credit card debt was discharged in my name, but the court ordered him to be responsible for repayment. The FSA fraud was referred to a separate investigation through my company's HR department and the insurance carrier. I was removed from any liability, which Claire confirmed to me in writing. The savings account, the one I hadn't known about, was included in the asset division. There was also a retirement account he had been drawing from, using an obscure provision he'd buried in paperwork I'd signed years earlier without fully reading. That was recovered too. It took 7 months. 7 months of mediation sessions and document exchanges and conversations with Diane that always left me feeling wrung out but slightly clearer. 7 months of rebuilding a budget for one person, learning which bills had always been in my name, which subscriptions had auto-renewed on credit cards I hadn't known existed. Faye came and stayed with me for 3 weeks during the hardest part. She brought groceries and didn't ask a lot of questions and watched terrible reality TV with me in the evenings, which was exactly what I needed. I want to be honest about the part that people never really talk about. Even after I knew, even after I had the documents and the attorney and the facts laid out in clear order, I still spent weeks second-guessing myself. Wondering if I had misread things. Wondering if maybe there was some explanation I hadn't considered. Feeling guilty for destroying a marriage that I hadn't actually destroyed? That's the lasting damage of being gaslit for years. It doesn't stop when you leave. You carry the habit of doubting yourself right out the door. My therapist, I started seeing one about a month in, called it hypervigilant self-questioning. She said it was extremely common in people who had been in controlling relationships, and that the fact that I noticed myself doing it was actually a good sign. I didn't feel like it was a good sign. I mostly felt exhausted, but I kept going to therapy. I kept showing up to work. I kept asking Faye to come over when it got bad, and she always came. Slowly, over months, something shifted. I stopped waking up at 3 a.m. running mental replays. I stopped apologizing in conversations before I'd even said anything wrong. I started keeping my own accounts, just mine, and found that I was actually pretty good at managing money when nobody was quietly redirecting it. Claire, my supervisor, checked in with me a few times during those months, never intrusively. She would just stop by my desk and ask how things were going and mean it. She was the person who, when the HR investigation concluded and my name was fully cleared, walked over and said simply, "I'm glad we caught it." Walked over and said simply, "I'm glad we caught it." And then went back to her office. That meant more to me than a longer speech would have. Here's what I know now that I didn't know at 31, when I was handing a near stranger a sticky note with my work password on it, because I thought that's what trust looked like. Financial control is abuse. It doesn't require yelling or threats. It operates in the same quiet frequency as a slow gas leak. You don't smell it until something ignites. And by then you've usually been breathing it in for a long time. Giving someone access to your accounts is not the same as trusting them. Real trust is built from consistent behavior over time, not from removing all your boundaries at once to prove you have nothing to hide. The people who pressure you to prove your trust by eliminating privacy are not the people who deserve your trust. And this one matters. The shame belongs to the person who deceived you, not to you. I wasted a lot of months feeling humiliated that I hadn't seen it sooner. Eventually, I had to let that go, because carrying someone else's shame was exactly what he had always wanted me to do. I got a new apartment last spring. 3rd floor, good light, a kitchen that's only ever organized the way I like it. I have one checking account, one savings account, and the credit card in my name that I pay off in full every month and check the statement on personally every week. My credit score, after the card disputes were resolved, is better than it has ever been. I got a promotion again last fall. Different title, different responsibilities. Claire wasn't in my direct chain anymore, but she sent me a congratulations email and I saved it. I've started dating again, slowly, in that tentative way of someone who knows exactly what she's not willing to overlook anymore. My list of non-negotiables isn't that long, but it is firm. Some of my friends ask if I'm angry. Mostly I tell them no, which is mostly true. Anger takes up a lot of energy, and I've found better things to put that energy into. What I feel most days is clear. It took losing quite a lot to get there, but I'll take it. The moment I stopped protecting his secrets was the moment I started protecting myself, and I will never, for as long as I live, write my password on a sticky note for anyone again. I've thought a lot about how everything unraveled, and the thing that stays with me most is how small the beginning was. A printed sheet of paper, a supervisor closing her office door. $4,000 in claims I never filed. That's all it took, not because I was looking for it, not because I had finally gotten brave enough to dig. It found me. And I think that's worth sitting with for a minute, because I used to believe that if something was wrong in my life, I would know. I would feel it clearly. I would act. What I understand now is that when you're in the middle of something, you often can't see its edges. I wasn't weak. I wasn't foolish. I was someone who had been gradually taught over years to interpret red flags as proof of my own oversensitivity. Every time I almost noticed something, there was a ready explanation, a gentle pivot, a reminder of everything he did for us. By the time the FSA claims showed up on Claire's desk, I had been talking myself out of my own instincts for so long that I had almost forgotten I had them. That's what control actually looks like up close. Not a cage. A very slow, very patient redirection of your own judgment, until you're not sure what you actually think anymore. When Faye asked me how long I'd been making excuses for things that didn't add up, I didn't answer. But I knew, I had known for a while, somewhere underneath everything, that the numbers weren't right, that some explanations were too smooth. I just hadn't let myself follow that thread to where it led, because following it meant disrupting something I had built my life around. That's the hardest part to admit, not that he deceived me, but that I had a hand in letting it continue. Because stopping it required a kind of courage I hadn't fully found yet. what I know now, and what I want anyone going through something like this to understand, is that clarity isn't something that arrives all at once. It comes in pieces. A printed sheet, a credit report, a phone call to your sister in a parking garage because you don't know where else to start. You don't have to have the whole picture before you take the first step. You just have to take it. Diane told me to stop moving money and start documenting. That was the whole instruction. It was enough. The outcome of my situation was shaped entirely by the choices both of us made. He chose to use my name, my credentials, my trust as tools for his own benefit. I chose, eventually, to stop protecting that. Every consequence that followed, the investigation, the legal proceedings, the recovered accounts, came directly from those choices meeting each other in a room. There's something clarifying about that. Not comforting, exactly, but clarifying. The world does respond to what we do. Not always quickly, not always visibly, but the thread between action and consequence is real. He built something on a foundation of deception, and deception has a shelf life. It ends. It always ends. What I carry forward isn't anger. It's a very clear set of things I now know about myself. I know I can read a financial statement. I know I can make hard calls. I know that the people who love me, Faye showing up with groceries, Claire walking over to say 2 quiet sentences, are the measure of what a real relationship actually looks like. And I know that self-respect is not something someone else can give you. You build it by making one honest decision at a time, even when it's frightening. Especially when it's frightening. The sticky note with my password on it is gone. That version of me is gone too. I'm not sure I'd call what replaced her better in every way. She's more careful, more watchful, quicker to trust her own read of a room. But she's also more certain of what she deserves. And that certainty, I've found, is the thing that changes everything else.